Hey, and welcome to this episode of the show where we are talking all about that all-important subject of building as much muscle as possible in the shortest possible time frame. Now, whether your goal is a female who's looking to get a little bit more toned, shapely, sculpted, but not too bulky, this is for you. Trust me, you want to build muscle in the shortest possible time frame. You are not going to get big and bulky by any stretch of the imagination. By not following the optimum way of building muscle, you are just going to elongate the process to achieving the body of your dreams. And likewise, if you're a dude, maybe you also don't want to look like a pro bodybuilder. Trust me, you fucking won't. Trust me, you want to build muscle in the shortest possible time frame. So get those thoughts out of your head that building muscle means Schwarzenegger. Building muscle means Phil Heath. There are levels to this. There are beginner levels, intermediate levels, advanced levels, and then there's pro bodybuilder levels. You are not at that level. You are not going to build so much muscle that you wonder where the fuck it came from. So here is your blueprint for building muscle. Now, this came from me revising for my Mac Nutrition Uni nutritionist exams. I developed this blueprint for building muscle, which were all the key component parts that someone might need to go through in order to build as much muscle as possible in the shortest possible time frame. And you are now benefiting from that revision and that research. So what I'm going to do is going to take you through calories, I'm going to take you through macros, I'm going to take you through supplements, I'm going to take you through how to measure your progress, I'm going to take you through the optimum strategy for protein, plus a bunch of other little tips, tricks, and techniques so that you can build the most amount of muscle possible and sculpt the lean, healthy body that you have been searching for. Now, I'll also say that if you want to dive into this and accelerate your progress even more, then maybe getting me to scope it all out, map it all out for you is the way to go. And if you feel by the end of this podcast that that is what you want to do, then what you need to do is head over to IamParadiseFitness.com and check out my online coaching program where you can find out how I can help you apply all of the things and more of what we're covering in this particular episode of the podcast to accelerate you from where you are now through all of your complications, your barriers, your obstacles, whether they be from a training point of view, nutrition point of view, or mindset point of view, so that you can leapfrog to the best version of yourself in the shortest possible time frame. So if that sounds like what you want to do, after this podcast is over, head over to IamParadiseFitness.com and check that out. But for now, we are going to talk about the building muscle blueprint, and we are going to start with calories. Now, calories are still important when it comes to building muscle, although training comes way above everything else. If you haven't got training, resistance training, really specifically, if you want to build the most amount of muscle, then you haven't got anything. You need that training stimulus. You need the reason for your body to start adapting. You can have the best nutrition strategy in the world, but if you're sat on your ass doing fuck all, you won't build much muscle whatsoever. So make sure you've got that key component in place first. Now, the next thing that you could argue is the most important thing is protein, because once you've got training in place, nothing much is going to happen without protein. But for me, like, protein is, yes, it's super important. But we kind of start with calories first because it's kind of logical and it also influences how we set up your macro breakdown. So that's why we're kind of starting with calories first. Now, again, let's get through some ground rules first. You can build muscle in a calorie deficit. You can build muscle at maintenance, and you can build muscle in a calorie surplus. But for the purposes of this, we are building muscle in a calorie surplus because it's the most optimum way to do it. So if you're someone who's maybe slightly overweight and your primary focus is to drop body fat, then maybe this blueprint isn't right for you. Clearly, there are going to be some aspects of this that are completely transferable, but when it comes to the calorie side of things, you're going to want to be in a deficit. You can still apply some of these things as well if you really want to try and optimize how much muscle you build within that deficit. But really, if the focus is fat loss, you don't really need to go to maybe this level of detail, especially when we dive into some of the different aspects like supplementation and things like that. So really, you are the person now who I'm talking to is really focused on building muscle, really wants to dive into a calorie surplus, the optimum environment for you to build most amount of muscle possible. This is what that's geared at. So first of all, we're going to start with BMR, so basal metabolic rate. This is how many calories you're burning at rest. Now, how we work that out is a couple of different ways. Now, if you are a client of mine, I've got this complex spreadsheet where I put in all of your information. I kind of put in what your training program is going to look like. I'm kind of putting in aspects about your lifestyle, job, or the activity you do outside of that. All of that information is going into me calculating your BMR in probably, I like to think, a slightly more scientific way. But my guess is that you don't want me to talk you through every single formula within my spreadsheet. That would be a fucking boring podcast. So what I'm going to give you is a super simple way that's going to get you in the right ballpark, because that's kind of what we need to do. No calculation, whether it's me doing it for you or whether you're using some complex calculator online or using this method I'm going to talk you through now, each one of those is going to be wrong. It's how wrong is it is kind of the thing that you're really searching for. And every number that you get back from all these different online calculators will probably all be different for a multitude of different reasons. But what you've got to do is take that number, apply it for a couple of weeks and see what happens. If you are losing weight and you're trying to be in a calorie surplus, bump up the calories. If you are trying to be in a calorie surplus, but you're not trying to put on weight too quickly, but your weight is skyrocketing, then maybe pull the calories back. Again, it's just this trial and error process where you find what works for you. So when you are calculating BMR, take your total body weight, and if you're a dude, times it by 24, and if you're a woman, times it by 22. That's going to get you to your rough BMR. Now, I'll also say, if you go to ironparadisefitness.com or my Instagram page at iron_paradise_fitness, you will find a guide on how to do this. On ironparadisefitness.com, you can download that guide. On Instagram, it's on my highlight. Hit the highlight button that says calories, and it'll take you through the screenshots of how to do this step by step. But essentially, that's going to give you your BMR. What you then need to want to do is add on your physical activity level, or PAL, basically kind of how active you are in general life, and then also the exercise burnt through exercise. And again, you do this by a multiplier of an activity level. Now that might be like 1.1, so you're taking the number you calculated for BMR, timesing it by 1.1 if you are very sedentary, basically doing fuck all. If you are then like doing a very manual job, plus you go to the gym a lot, you're maybe in the region of 1.7 plus. Now again, those guys will guide you through maybe what the right activity level is for you. But again, it comes back to trial and error. Remember, if you're not putting on weight, you're probably not in a surplus. So you want to start increasing those calories, and vice versa if the weight's going on too quick. So that's really kind of how you're going to get to the right number of calories. Remember, it's going to take some trial and error. It's not going to be exact from day fucking one. Next up, we're going to talk about protein. Now, protein, like I said before, is super important for building muscle. Without protein, without training, you ain't building much muscle. So it's important we get this right. Now, I would start someone off maybe in the region of 1.8 to 2.7 grams per kilo. Now, that is driven by your protein feeding strategy, which we're going to come on to later in the podcast. But after you've implemented the protein feeding strategy, you'll find that you'll drift towards 1.8 to 2.7 naturally. If you kind of like really high protein foods, you're going to be slightly towards the higher end. If you just want to keep things maybe a little bit more balanced, maybe you want to put more calories to carbohydrate because you want to fuel those workouts, then 1.8 might be in the ballpark. My advice is to keep it on the lower end, because you'll still build just as much muscle at 1.8 as you will at 2.7, but you'll have more calories for other shit, which is going to make your diet a lot more enjoyable. So that's that. Then we're going to look at fat. Now, fat, you need a minimum amount of fat in your diet for proper hormone function and for other sort of healthy functions in the body to be carried out. Now, I would recommend anywhere between like 25 to 45% of total calories coming from fat. And that range will be flexed based on what's right for you. So what food choices you like, what naturally you start to like to eat day to day will influence whether you're slightly lower fat or slightly higher fat. My only advice would probably full on keto, maybe not the right optimal environment for building the most amount of muscle, but you could do it if you wanted to. Now, there is some research to say that slightly higher fat in that range, so up towards more 40%, may be more beneficial for more sex steroid hormone, which could influence the amount of muscle you build. But again, it's marginal. Stick to what you feel you can adhere to and it's what's going to be the most enjoyable. If you feel like slightly higher carbs mean you have better workouts, maybe put more of your calories to carbohydrates than fat. But there you go. Mess about with it. Feel what's right for you. And don't feel like you're stuck into that specific macro split for the rest of eternity. You can flex that fucking thing day to day if you want. Just make sure you're hitting protein, minimum amount of fat, do what the fuck you want with the rest. That's what I would do, and that's how I would focus on it. When it comes to like micronutrients, so the vitamins, minerals, all that sort of stuff, because you're having so many fucking calories, then you should kind of really not have too much of an issue when it comes to fitting in all those vitamin minerals, unless you're being super restrictive with the food choices that you're making. But if you're having a wide range of different protein sources, a wide range of fruits and vegetables, you should find that hitting your micronutrient requirements is fairly easy. But you can always take a multivitamin as a bit of an insurance policy. That's entirely up to you. So let's now move on to supplements. Supplements are a bit of a thing when it comes to building muscle, much more so than when you're trying to lose body fat. Now, the supplements that you would start with, probably really going to be creatine. That's going to be where you want to start. It's really going to help you with strength, with power, with moving more weight, moving more mass means that you're going to have potentially higher training volume, more adaptation, so on and so on and so on. It's just a proven supplement to take, male, female, whatever. If you want to build muscle, take some creatine. It's going to be good. But there are people who don't respond to creatine. So if you find that it just literally does nothing for you, then there are non-responders out there. And in that case, just fucking ditch it. Next up, you might say, okay, well, caffeine. Caffeine could help me with force, power, strength, alertness, all these different sorts of things, basically improving your workouts. You have to, though, balance caffeine supplementation with when you are having your particular workouts. Because if you're having your workout in the evening, you don't want to be ramming a fuckload of caffeine down your system and keeping yourself awake at night, because sleep is far more important than supplementation when we come to build muscle. So think about that. Have that trade-off. If you are training late at night, do not ram a shit ton of caffeine down your neck and sacrifice sleep. That's the wrong fucking way around. The next supplement you might want to look at, and again, these are all mights, you don't have to do any of this, would be L-carnitine. Now, L-carnitine has a little bit of evidence, 2 grams per day, that it's going to help you minimize fat gain in a calorie surplus through better nutrient partitioning. You're going to basically spare some glycogen and you're going to use a bit more fat. Now, that's kind of a good thing. So I think that potentially the little bit of evidence that is there makes that something that you might want to consider. And it's not that expensive. So potentially that's a good supplement to include in your strategy. Something that you could also include is beta-alanine. Now, again, like there's a little bit of, I'd say like mixed on this one, is that there is some evidence to show that in exercise that is fatiguing over 90 seconds, it does help you buffer that fatigue. So it helps you kind of last a little bit longer, as they say. So that could be beneficial for you. Might want to include that. It's pretty much in every fucking pre-workout that you'll ever take. So you might be taking it anyway without realizing it. But again, there is some evidence to say that that might be beneficial for you. Kind of how you work beta-alanine though is there's a loading phase. So loading phase is really around about 80 milligrams per kilo per day, spread over like 4 servings. And then when you get into maintenance after about 4 weeks or so, is you drop that by half. And that's kind of your maintenance. Again, over like 2 to 4 servings though. On top of that, fish oil and vitamin D. If you've not got enough oily fish, fish oil is good to have in your diet. And if you're not getting enough direct sunlight every day, vitamin D is also good as well. So there are your supplements, rattling through those to build muscle. Now, when we talk about progress, if you're in a calorie surplus, so you're probably going to be around 200 to 300 calories to start with. But again, you're going to be doing that trial and error process. Now, most of all, I would recommend you take measurements. So yes, you're going to look at scale weight, but you also want to look at muscle girth. So like how big your arms are, chest is, thighs are, so you can track that over time. You might also want to look at your waist to hip ratio, and that might be showing you if you're putting on too much body fat. Then you can also look at pictures as well. But in terms of scale weight, I would say a rough ballpark, and this is just a real rough generalization, is 1 kilo per month is probably about right for most people. Again, you might feel like you want to push that a bit harder. You might feel it's too much. Again, find the balance that's right for you. Next up, we've got your protein strategy. Now, this is super important. If you want to, again, build the most amount of muscle possible, your protein strategy and protein feedings are probably going to be one of the most important things you want to focus on. Why? Because multiple protein feedings are going to help minimize muscle protein breakdown, and they're going to help maximize muscle protein synthesis. So you're going to avoid breakdown, and you're going to maximize the process of building new muscle. That's going to be fucking good, right? So really, how we approach this is 4 to 6 servings of protein per day, spread throughout the day. Now that really comes in the form of probably 2 to 3 main meals. So you're thinking breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Now each one of those is going to have 0.4 to 0.5 grams per kilo of protein, and you can work that out quite easily. But it just means you're probably just going to have to work out, roughly speaking, how much protein you want per meal in those main meals in order to make sure that you're optimizing your protein strategy throughout the day. Most of you are also going to have, I would assume, some form of protein shake post-workout. Now that you want probably within an hour, 1 to 3 hours, around about 0.3 grams per kilo of protein in that. And then finally, something pre-bed as well, like a casein protein, maybe some 0% fat Greek yogurt, something like that. 0.5 to 0.6 grams per kilo before bed. If you do that, you will find that you will come out at that 1.8, 2 grams per kilo of protein intake total, but you'll have optimized how that's delivered into your body to optimize the amount of muscle that you're building. So that's like the key thing that you really want to focus in on. Other things to focus in on is make sure your sleep is optimized. Make sure that it helps you to avoid injury. It helps you get better workouts, helps you be more consistent. Sleep deprivation and trying to get the most out of your workouts is just probably not a compatible thing. So sleep is really kind of the most important thing after you've got those macros right. It comes before supplementation. So like I said before, if you're having bucket loads of fucking caffeine and you're wired to the freaking max, like some sort of meth addict, then maybe kind of dial that back, maybe focus in on your sleep first. You also maybe want to think about more calorie dense foods, because some people can find it difficult to eat up to the amount of calories that they need to be in a surplus. They feel full all the time, especially if you're going for these like really nutrient dense foods. In that case, do the complete opposite to what you'd be advised to do in a calorie deficit. Get some liquid calories down you. Fruit juices, smoothies, that sort of stuff that really you can put a load of calories into and doesn't fill you up. You could also aim for like really highly palatable foods. So foods that you can eat because they taste fucking good, and it's okay almost to overeat on those because you're going into a calorie surplus. If you're still matching that calorie target, you can still eat those foods, and it makes it easier to get them down your neck. And then also drift towards the lower end of that protein range, because protein is going to be more satiating, so it's going to fill you up. Now, if you don't want to feel full because you're struggling to fit the calories down your fucking neck, drifting towards the slower end of that protein target means that you'll get all the benefits from protein, but you'll get a less satiating effect from it. So that's kind of the whole thing. But the thing you can also think about is once all of your nutrient requirements are met, you can do what the fuck you want. So you've got your protein, you've got your minimum amount of fat, You've got the carbohydrates you wanted to fuel your workouts. You've got the nutrients for vitamins and minerals. If you've got a whole fuckload of calories left over, do what the fuck you want with them and make yourself happy, because that's kind of half the process, isn't it? So hopefully that gave you a quick insight into the real blueprint for building the most amount of muscle possible. If it helped you, come and let me know. Visit me on Instagram at iron_paradise_fitness. If you have any questions about this, drop me a DM on Instagram. I'll be glad to help you out. Let me know you listened to the podcast. Let me know what you thought and ask me a bunch of questions if you have any. But all that remains for me to say right now is thanks so much for listening. Keep living the lean life, and I'll see you for the next episode of the show.